How is it possible for a whole family to sleep through a blizzard inside a thin animal hide tent without freezing? Picture yourself on the Great Plains in the middle of January. Across the open landscape, the wind races unimpeded for hundreds of miles. Temperatures drop far below zero, and snowdrifts swallow the terrain. Someone with expensive gear and modern camping equipment might make it through a night or two, but a traveler without preparation could perish before dawn. Yet for centuries, Plains Native American peoples endured such winters in tipis built from wooden poles and buffalo skins. There was no foam insulation, brick walls, or electric heating. No glass windows, only fire, hides, airflow, and know-how. To an outsider, the tipi seemed temporary, almost fragile. But concealed within that simple cone-shaped shelter was one of the most brilliant survival systems ever devised in North America. It was so efficient that many modern survival techniques still echo the very same logic today. The most surprising thing was that the secret lay not only in the fire, but in the design itself. Few realized the tipi was never merely a tent. It was built for survival, and every aspect of its shape had a purpose. The conical form was crucial on the exposed plains, where fierce winds blew without pause. Unlike rectangular structures that caught gusts on their flat sides, the tipi allowed the wind to flow around it effortlessly, so storms rapped past the shelter. Rather than battering straight against it, this one design decision made all the difference. Snow slipped naturally down the sloped sides instead of accumulating on top, and the circular layout spread warmth evenly. Strong wooden poles leaned inward to form a stable skeleton, flexible enough to bend under strong wind pressure without giving way. Most tipis were made of long lodgepole pine or cedar poles lashed together near the top. Thick buffalo hides were stretched over this frame and secured tightly to the ground. In winter, extra hide liners were placed against the inside walls, creating trapped pockets of air, and that hidden airspace worked like insulation. Contemporary homes still apply this same principle. The people who made these shelters understood something many modern individuals forget. Survival isn't about fighting nature, it's about directing it. That truth was most obvious in the fire burning at the center each night. The blaze became the heart of the world within the tipi, but managing it required real skill. Too large a fire would fill the shelter with smoke, choking everyone inside. Too small a fire allowed the cold to creep slowly into blankets, hides, and lungs. Plains tribes learned to maintain steady, controlled warmth instead of raging flames. Placement was important, the type of wood was important, and airflow was important. Directly above the fire sat one of the tipi's most remarkable features: adjustable smoke flaps near the top opening. Those flaps could be repositioned according to the wind's direction, and when properly angled, they produced a draft that carried smoke upward. While preserving precious heat inside, they operated almost like a natural ventilation engine. Even today, many modern cabins struggle with smoke circulation, but Plains tribes mastered this centuries ago, using only observation and knowledge passed down through generations. At night, fires were often banked into glowing coals and covered lightly with ash. This kept heat alive until morning while wasting no fuel before sunrise. A simple stir could reawaken the flames, and the tipi never truly grew cold. Many early European observers were astonished at how warm these shelters stayed even during violent storms. From outside, the structure looked primitive. Inside, it worked like a carefully balanced thermal system. Yet no fire, no matter how excellent, could solve winter's greatest danger, the ground itself. Cold air is risky, but frozen earth is fatal. The ground pulls heat away faster than the wind because direct contact constantly drains body warmth through conduction. Native American tribes understood this long before science explained it, which is why they built their living space upward. A winter tipi's interior floor was carefully constructed. The first layer consisted of grass, reeds, willow branches, or brush. Woven mats sat above that. Buffalo robes, elk hides, deerskins, and fur blankets were then piled on in successive layers. Far more than mere sleeping pads, these layers formed an insulating system. Each one trapped small bubbles of warm air while keeping sleepers separate from the frozen ground. The thicker these underlayers became, the more efficiently they held in body heat. Today's sleeping pads for camping rely on exactly the same principle. Children were typically buried the deepest in the warm bedding, while the adults slept in a circle around the fire. The elders kept the closest to the heat. Every position within the teepee served a distinct purpose. And then there was another form of warmth that's easy to overlook: other people. Plains winter survival was never a solo undertaking, it was collective. A single teepee often held an entire extended family. Parents, children, grandparents, and relatives crowded close together during life-threatening cold spells. Modern audiences might see that as uncomfortable, but being comfortable was never the point. Heat came from human bodies, and those bodies produce a huge amount of warmth when packed into a closed space. With insulated walls and a carefully tended fire, a sleeping family could boost the dwelling's internal heat dramatically. Infants would be swaddled in fur and wedged between adults for protection. Younger children remained near their mothers or grandparents, while the elderly stayed right next to the fire, the hottest place. Dogs, too, sometimes helped with warmth. Inside those winter shelters, the teepee became a cooperative system, with every person working to ensure everyone else's survival. Today's survival experts call it shared thermal retention. The Plains tribe simply called it everyday life. But one of the most ingenious aspects of the structure was all but invisible. The walls themselves actually breathed. A widespread misconception holds that teepees were completely sealed and airtight. In fact, they were nothing of the sort. The true cleverness of the design lay in its regulated airflow during cold months. Often, an inside lining was hung a few feet inward from the outer hide walls. That left an insulating air gap between the two surfaces. Air that slipped in near the bottom was trapped, slowly warmed, and then rose. At the same time, the central fire's smoke naturally drew air upward to the top opening. The entire shelter acted like a slow-moving system for regulating climate. Fresh air entered near the floor, smoke went out through the top, and warmth circulated non-stop. When storms hit, the smoke flaps were angled with care to match the wind's direction. Experienced families knew precisely how the weather influenced airflow. Even a tiny shift in the flap angle could completely alter the environment inside. In the summer, they could raise the lower edges of the hides to improve ventilation and cooling. Come winter, everything was secured tightly to shut out snow and wind. The teepee's design shifted with the seasons. That flexibility gave it an edge over many rigid structures that settlers erected on the plains later. Some log cabins trapped moisture, smoke, and stale air even worse than indigenous homes. But all of this depended on the animal that made survival on the plains possible in the first place. For the Plains tribes, the buffalo represented survival itself. Just about every part of the animal was put to use. Meat delivered the calories needed to endure harsh winters. Bones became tools, and sinew became rope or cord. Yet perhaps no resource mattered more than hides. Buffalo hide proved extraordinarily efficient. When it came to wind and freezing temperatures, heavy winter hides still bearing fur served as nature's own insulation. Such layers greatly outperformed the flimsy cloth garments that many early colonists relied on. One hide alone could keep icy gusts out and hold heat within the dwelling. Within the teepee, occupants wrapped themselves in stacked robes of bison, deer, elk, and various other furs. Fur held warm air next to the skin, all the while deflecting dampness and drafts. Even when slightly wet, animal hides frequently proved warmer than cloth weaves. For Great Plains tribes, this was crucial amid blizzards and frigid nights, because buffalo meant far more than mere animals. They provided housing, garments, bedding, fuel transport, implements, and indeed existence itself. Come winter, staying alive frequently hinged on making the most of every last asset. Waste was not an option. The most vital survival asset within the teepee was not flame but wisdom. From childhood, people learned to interpret the sky, direct ventilation, keep coals alive, arrange sleeping areas, and set hides in the right way. Such life-saving expertise was continually handed down by watching and doing. They knew exactly how to orient the doorway according to dominant winds and how to secure the dwelling against gales. They could also spot alarming shifts in smoke movement that hinted at ventilation issues. Each winter turned into a lesson. That know-how proved especially vital during whiteout conditions, since violent storms might submerge lodges beneath deep snow. As temperatures sank to lethal levels, families figured out how to keep the inside comfortable even with limited fuel supplies. And contrary to today's world, there was no emergency response to call upon. Should the system break down, death followed. That harsh truth compelled advancements. The tipi lasted for generations, not due to being crude, but because it performed remarkably in one of North America's most unforgiving landscapes. Curiously, contemporary survival research continually stumbles upon the same insights. Examine present-day cold weather equipment carefully, and you'll find reflections of the tipi all around. Multiple insulating layers, airflow regulation, trapped heat pockets, insulation from the ground, warmth conservation, and group body heat. These underlying concepts remain unchanged. Today's climbers rely on thermal sleeping mats because icy earth drains body warmth. Polar coats hold in heat precisely the way stacked fur robes used to. Ventilation setups in winter shelters continue to weigh fresh air against escaping warmth, mirroring the smoke flaps of centuries past. Equipment has advanced, yet the underlying principle remains unchanged. Plains peoples saw winter not as a foe to conquer, but as a force to cooperate with wisely. Their dwellings harnessed physics, ventilation, insulation, and collective coping tactics so successfully that many are still pertinent in the present. This may be the greatest misconception modern minds hold about ancient living. We suppose early societies were unsophisticated simply because their tools seemed basic, yet simplicity frequently represents the pinnacle of expertise. By what means did Native Americans manage to sleep in tipis and avoid freezing? Neither luck nor sheer endurance provided the answer. They endured by wielding concepts that contemporary people seldom consider: thermal insulation, air circulation, layers of warmth, careful fuel management, communal support, and bending to nature's will rather than pushing against it. Far from being a primitive hovel confronting the cold, the tipi was a precisely engineered survival device honed through countless generations of Great Plains experience. Perhaps that's exactly why it remains so captivating today. Surrounded by electric heating, insulated homes, and contemporary technology, countless individuals would find it nearly impossible to endure even one winter night without those modern comforts. Still, entire generations weathered storms, blizzards, and lethal cold using wisdom passed down through memory instead of machines. Maybe the past was never truly as primitive as we tend to assume. Perhaps the approach to survival back then was simply different. If this look at forgotten winter survival techniques caught you off guard, tell us which particular detail amazed you the most. Was it the clever ventilation system, the insulated floor design, or the way families came together to share heat throughout the night? And if you love unearthing the hidden brilliance of ancient cultures, subscribe to Shadows of Valhalla for more captivating stories. These are stories where history, resilience, and human intellect converge in the darkness, because sometimes the most ancient wisdom still reveals the brightest light.